Hey everyone, Ben Coomber Radio, episode number 183. Now, let's look at this. The podcast has been around for 3.5, coming up to 4 years now, and we've talked about an incredible amount of information and the health of you, the health of me, and what we're trying to achieve as individuals moving forward is very much at the cornerstone of the information that I want to get across to you. And we've been through a lot of information on the gut, and we haven't been through information on the gut for a while, and I'm going to revisit it today. There's a lot of conversations that are happening in the fitness industry all the time on the gut, celiac, IBS, intolerances, sensitivities, what are the key players, what are the issues, what should we pay attention to, how do we test for this stuff. It's an absolute minefield, and you'll see articles on the internet all the time about where this information lies and what you need to pay attention to. So I've got a guest today who's written a very recent book, and for me, well, hopefully we're going to find out, is very much in line with hopefully what the new research is saying, what's evolving in the world of the gut, and we're going to learn a bit more from a different angle from what we have covered already. So welcome onto the show, Jeannette Hyde. Hello.
Hello.
Jeannette is a author. She's got a book out at the moment called The Gut Makeover, which we'll cover later on in the show. But I need to introduce you. I need to give the stage to Jeannette for a minute. So Jeannette, what's your background? What do you do? And how did you get to a point today where you've got a book and you want to educate the world more on the gut?
Well, I'm a registered nutritional therapist. I've been going a few years. I did originally a BSc in nutritional therapy at Westminster University. So the way that I was trained was to look at, be able to evaluate and look at research as it's coming out and interpret that into clinical practice. So that's what I've been doing in the way that I work the last few years. And the kind of people I was seeing individually were people who would come to see me with a whole range of issues. Sometimes weight loss might be one of them, but they tended to come to see me about bigger issues, and the weight loss was sort of, the bonus if that happened as well.
Sure.
But the way that I work, very much, based on functional medicine, identifying root causes, and being able to rebalance people from that way. The thing that was interesting as I was going along was that as you will have seen, especially over the last 3 years, the research on this thing called the microbiome, which is the bacteria in our bodies, but predominantly in the colon, where there are trillions and trillions of bacteria in there. You will have seen that the research that was coming out on this microbiome was just absolutely explosive. And, when I started to see some of the things that it was being connected with, so the health and the balance of this microbiome, this 1.5 kilos of bacteria in your gut, whether that's in balance or not, having a massive knock-on impact on the rest of your health. Everything from your weight to your immune system, to your skin, to your mood. And I started to, start interpreting what I was seeing into clinical practice on an everyday level. So some people just have been going in with supplementation and billions of bacteria and probiotics and all the rest of it. And the approach that I've been doing is very much through food, and it's the way of eating that I hope is sustainable for the long term. It isn't the short-term fix.
Okay, interesting. So you mentioned supplements, you mentioned real food. I can imagine your approach is probably in the middle of the two extremes. You know when to use supplementation, when to use food. It's about bridging that gap, and I suppose essentially looking at the client and the needs of that client, essentially.
Yeah, that's right. But I have to say that one thing I'm very aware of as a nutritional therapist, I don't know what it's like for personal trainers, we are absolutely bombarded with information from supplement companies. And there's some really good supplements out there, and there are some, lots of interesting stuff out there. But I mean, the way I was practicing a few years ago was I was writing entire supplement programs for people. I'd be sort of trying to tweak their diet and take out all the bad stuff and try and get in lots of the good stuff. And while that was going on, I'd be doing a lot with supplementation as well. But it's kind of not a way of working for the long term. I mean, I can give somebody for a month a program, right? Take this in the morning, take that many billions of probiotics in the evening. Do you know what I mean? I'll take this to heal your gut lining. You seem to need your absorption's not very good, so let's top up on these sort of vitamins or minerals or whatever. But who wants to take a supplement program for the rest of their life? No. So the way I've just evolved the way that I practice now, and that's how I did used to practice, but I have really tried hard when I was writing this book and I was going through the literature of thinking about how you could eat the right diet in a balanced way to get your digestion and everything back into balance, and to restore your microbiome so that you can just sort of keep these new habits going long term. It's not like you get on the plane and go on holiday and you forget your supplement program and you're doomed. I try to give people principles that they can keep going for the long term.
Okay, interesting point. Coming back to probiotics, and I don't know if this is still the case. When I first started working with the gut, probiotics, and myself, I've explained to the listeners many a times my journey with my gut. It was like, take a probiotic, you need like 1 million bacteria, and then it was 2 million, then it was 5 million, then it was 10 billion, and then we're at this number now. For you, does the research keep increasing this number, and where do you think it will get to if we're going to end up and continue supplementing with probiotics?
I just don't think probiotics are a long-term solution for most people. Okay. So what I think, look, I've tried probiotics with clients as well, and some of them, like you said, you don't really see any difference, because it's like peeing in the wind. If you got below about 6 billion, mm-hmm. You need to actually be into double figures before you start to because the probiotics, the bacteria's got to make it through the stomach acid, or you've got to get stragglers down there into the colon. So you need these really sort of high level ones. And I've forgotten the question now.
So my original question is, because for me, probiotics, if I ever use them as a practitioner, I use them as a short-term intervention, like it sounds like you would. So got a client, problematic, gut needs some support. I might do 3 months of intensive probiotic supplementation. Yeah. But for me, when I started, the research was like, you need 1 million, then you need 5 million, and then all of a sudden it seems like you need 10 billion plus.
Well, I never saw anything that said 1 million. I don't know at what point I came into this. I probably started studying nutrition 10 years ago. Okay. And ever since I've been in it, since the beginning, of course, I don't actually think that was literature that I was seeing at that stage. It was what other nutritional therapists were telling me they're finding were working. And they were saying at that point, more than 6 billion before it has any impact at all. But the problem with some of these supplements now, I agree with you, we're up to like 50 billion has to be the minimum in there and all this kind of thing. When you start working with supplements, everybody's like individually different and you've got to personalise everything, and there isn't one strategy that works with one person. And these probiotics, I've got some people who they get terrible bloating as soon as they have a probiotic. I've seen other people where they feel sick and nauseous the whole time that they're on them. There isn't, I can't, put my hand up and go, yes, do that, take that, and that's what happens, because it's so different from person to person, and the products are also different, and it's also early days. So that's why I'm back with normal, real food.
Okay, and this is fascinating. Okay, so different question. With probiotics now is seen as probably the single go-to supplement for someone with something like IBS, or where I am in kind of fitness. Yeah. Like, if you've got an issue with the gut, I'll take probiotics. But what you're saying is that really that shouldn't be our first go-to approach. That shouldn't be our knee-jerk reaction.
No.
So simpler question. If someone suspects a gut issue in your eyes right now, what is the knee-jerk first reaction they should do to sort out their health and their gut?
Well, that's a massive question, and it really would depend from person to person. But yeah, in my book, I've gone for general principles because I'm having to write for a broad spectrum of people. So the first thing I would do is I would remove anything that could be from the diet that could be causing problems.
Yeah.
And again, that will be different from person to person to person. So, you know, nowadays, so I'd want to find out, a bit more about, is it acid reflux that person's got all the time? Or is it bloating? Or is it loose stools? Or is it constipation? But first of all, the first thing to do is take out anything that might be upsetting your digestive system. So if there is an intolerance or a sensitivity issue, that's the first thing. You want to stop sort of, pouring petrol on the fire, don't you? So you take that thing out. So so you take, certain, so things like, it depends at the moment if we're talking about individual working or if we're talking about what I've done with the book for a month, which is just some general principles. With the book for a month, I've taken out the grains and the gluten and dairy for the first 2 weeks. That's what I've done. Just because if any of those things have been triggers for people, you're taking them out.
Yep.
So, and then the thing that I then do is I load into the diet loads of vegetables and plants. And most of us, we don't eat enough vegetables and plants, we just don't. And the good thing is, if you take out the grains, and I'm not saying do this forever, by the way, it's just for 4 weeks, or while we're sort of trying to rebalance and find out what all the problem foods are, we take out we've taken out the grains, and then the space on the plate that leaves you can put plants on. So when I talk about plants, I'm talking about vegetables and some fruit, more vegetables than fruit, because you want to keep the sugar content down with the fruit. But with the vegetables, I talk about in the book 7, like if you get your fist like that, in volume, 7 fists in volume of, but mainly vegetables. You can have some fruit in there as well. But say 5 of these and 2 of fruit per day in terms of volume. And it's actually, when you start having to eat that amount of vegetables, you instantly are putting into the diet lots of fibre to feed the good bacteria in your gut. And you're also bringing in lots and lots of phytochemicals, plant chemicals like polyphenols and all those kind of things also feed lots of the good bacteria in your gut. So rather than sort of taking a pill, so if you take a pill and that sort of like plants in there sort of several billion good bacteria, rather than that, we're doing homegrown, the way that I'm doing it with the plants. So you're sort of, feeding all the right stuff so that the bacteria in there grows, flourishes, is fed. And the other thing is, so it's not only the volume, 7, and I talk about in the book as well, for digestive problems, a lot of well-cooked vegetables as well, because they're easier to digest and absorb the nutrients from and all the rest of it. But also variety, because a lot of us just have very, very sort of, it's the same old peas, carrots, sweet corn, you know what I mean? We all got our little comfort zone. And in what I really, really try to do with people is broaden their range of vegetables and plants that they're having. So, try in a week to get up to 30 different varieties. And you can do this easily by like literally looking at your plate and going, right, I'm going to put some colour on here. I'm going to snip some coriander on top of whatever I'm doing. I'm going to put some pomegranate seeds on top. I'm going to, what else could I, get a bit of spring onion. Do you know what I mean? Just cooking in a different way where you're trying to get the variety in there the whole time, because the more variety you have in your diet, the more diversity of bacteria one has in the gut. And when you've got nice diversity in there, that has been linked with really good health.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think at any point we can not argue that having a huge array of fruit and vegetables in the diet is kind of really important. I find it an interesting topic because I teach a lot of health and fitness professionals, and you could look at a personal trainer who is meant to be a extremely healthy individual. You could look at their diet, and you're right, the same things will keep cropping up. And, you know, in the fitness industry as well, we've got this idea that protein is king, and protein is very important. I'm not denying that. But around that, we never struggle with that area of our diet. What we struggle with, and is what you are focusing on, is the variety of fruit and vegetables. But we don't look at diet concepts that actually support this. So I'm a big fan of looking at vegan cooking, purely from the perspective that vegans tend to be very good at looking at a meal and saying, how much nutrition can I get in this meal? And calorie for calorie, they start to get so much more vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, antioxidants into a meal. So a lot of the time I'll say to a personal trainer, how many of you own a vegan cooking book? And like 2 hands will go up. Well, there's not enough protein in it. Well, cook a vegan meal and stick a chicken breast on the side, if that's what you feel needs to make up your nutrition. But we're not looking at really obvious routes to actually get massive nutritional density in our diet.
Yeah. And also when you bring in all the plants like this, it can be absolutely delicious, by the way, as well, and makes your food interesting. And you can have, the way I recommend it is a third of the plate is your protein. My only the problem I have with the vegan vegetarian diets is that I see a lot of people with gut problems, right? Mm. And quite often they come to me after they've been doing sort of flexitarian. Is it flexitarian where people are, I don't know, you know what I mean? Pescatarian. They're doing pescatarian, or they say they don't eat red meat, and I look at their diets, and number one, they are having cheese on toast a lot, and they're eating pesto and pasta. They're not having a lot of protein. They're actually having hardly any volume of plants over the course of the day. They're having a lot of stimulants, coffee and wine and all the rest of it. And they're not having any red meat, which means they've not got iron and, some of these basic things in there as well. And they're overweight because they're hungry all the time. Because the thing about protein, as you know, is it's really good at making you feel full up because it takes a long time to digest and absorb and all the rest of it. So I'm not a fan of vegan vegetarian diets. I totally see where you're coming from in terms of the concept about looking at the plate in a completely different way.
Yeah, for me the concept is the underlying theory that, because in any diet you can be bad at it or you can be good at it. Like I've seen many, like you say, vegetarians that eat awful diets, but if they ate a brilliant vegetarian diet, then they'd be a brilliantly healthy individual and they'd probably have sufficient protein and everything else. But, for me, I'm a big fan of, there's a diet concept that exists. Let's say paleo, for example. Paleo has its flaws, but it has its brilliant aspects. The brilliant aspect is its core focus is get anything out of the diet that upsets you. Period. Take it out. It's going to optimize your health straight away. And that's kind of my angle with the whole vegan thing, is that if you do it right, there can be learning curves there.
Yeah, the only thing is that I see a lot of people with gut problems, and if they have been vegetarians and vegans, the two foods that they maybe have overeaten over several years and have resulted in them having a lot of gut problems are all the beans, the pulses. They're full of lectins, can cause leaky gut if you have too much of that stuff in your diet. They have a lot of processed soya. Again, some of that really irritates the gut lining. As soon as you get leaky gut, of course, you then have dysbiosis and your gut bacteria gets out of balance and you start getting all the bloating and the wind and, other upsets as well. So I think with anything, I know that there are some people thrive on particular diets and all the rest of it. What I really, really try to do with the gut makeover is, as I said before, take out anything that could be upsetting the gut, put in lots of stuff to nourish the gut. There's lots of stuff in there. Also the oils that I recommend that you use and things like that. Olive oil, by the way, is the one I've gone for. It's got polyphenols that help feed the good bacteria and all that kind of thing. And loads of plants. But it's not paleo either. But of course there's a nod to paleo in there. But, I've seen some horrible corruptions of the paleo diet. Have you? I mean, when you see food diaries, again, but when I say horrible corruptions, people going into McDonald's and just sort of taking the bun off the top, and it's just not quality food. The whole point of a proper paleo diet is it should be really, wild meats, wild fish if you can, because those don't have antibiotics in them for a start, which can kill your gut bacteria. It'll be full of the diversity of plants and all the rest of it, because those are anti-inflammatory.
Okay. The kind of in the fitness industry, we see a lot of argument between whether people have sensitivities, intolerances, legitimate celiac disease, that kind of stuff. Now, obviously, if you've got celiac, you can go get a test, you get a diagnosis, and there's a strategy behind that when you work with a dietitian. Outside of that, where does your opinion lie on intolerances, sensitivities? How do you classify them? How do you test against them? And in your eyes, being someone that focuses on the gut, is it very much a legitimate thing, but something that's very context-driven for that individual?
Look, I think it would be really sort of out of date of anybody now to say there's only celiac disease or there's not. It is now, even if you look at the literature, accepted that there is a spectrum going on with, sensitivity to gluten. And there is, some people still are in complete denial, but it is beginning to gain traction that there is a sort of group of people who are non-celiac gluten sensitive. Mm-hmm. So this can be where you're having, reactions to gluten, but they're not your typical, autoimmune disorder of the intestine. It could be. I mean, I've seen people, and you may have as well, but I see a lot of people with gut problems, and I'm not saying some people are absolutely fine with gluten, and it is a hassle to take it out of your diet for the rest of your life, if you don't need to. So I wouldn't encourage someone to do that for the rest of their life if they didn't need to. However, if you take it out for a month, so in my book, you would take it out for a month, and then I've been working with groups doing gut makeovers the last few months, so like 10 people at a time, and it's been very, very interesting seeing what kind of percentage of each group starts to have the problems as soon as they put the gluten back in. I would say a third. I don't know. That's only small sample size, of course, but it's but what is interesting is if you take the gluten out and you find that your energy levels have come back, the brain fog has gone, your aching muscles, you're not having that anymore, your stool pattern has gone back to normal. I mean, and there is testing around now, like about the Cyrex testing and all the rest of it, so you can sort of see which bits within wheat and which proteins within the gluten you might be reacting to and all the rest of it. But that testing is very expensive. And I think sometimes, if you haven't got a lot of money, you can just sort of try this out for a month, do the elimination and challenge and see what happens. But if it is like massive, you had what you thought was IBS for the last 10 years, and suddenly you don't have it for a month, and then you put the gluten back in and you're back on the toilet again, and it's sort of really terrible bloating, and I'm sorry to go into detail, but I think, people often, are really, really suffering out there, and you've been told, oh, it's IBS, and actually you find that you took the gluten out, it was actually the gluten, then it's actually a revolutionary piece of information, and it can really change your health and your whole life, your quality of life.
I agree totally. Okay, when we first started this interview, you mentioned the microbiome, which is obviously starting to develop into a fascinating area of discussion. Now, with clients that don't have a direct reaction, so me, for example, when I eat dairy, I get quite initial stomach pain, I get a lot of water retention around my waist, and I get brain fog. For me, that's a very obvious kind of symptom. Now, for someone that might eat gluten and only really, let's say, get mental lethargy, which is something that could be quite mild. You could interpret it as a bad night's sleep or just not feeling great, or someone that has eczema. How do you try and connect the dots between what is not a direct symptom but might be something that's more mental or emotional or skin related? How do you start to explain it and explore that with clients?
Well, the first thing I'll say to anybody is keep a food diary, because it can be absolutely revolutionary. you might not even have worked out that it takes 12 hours for you know, the headache or the skin thing or the aches or whatever. And until you literally plot everything you're eating down for several days, and then in the other column, one column what the food is, and one column, you know, some of these symptoms, these horrible chronic symptoms that you're having, and then you can start to see what is the problem. And one of the groups I've just done, there was a lady who she'd had acid reflux for 10 years. She came on the course. After just within a few days, acid reflux stopped. She, you know, the first time in 10 years. And then she had one day where it came back a bit again. So I said to her, listen, start writing down everything and do this, you know, food and symptom diary. And do you want to know what we worked out over the next week? It was, because it was chicken.
Oh, wow.
I haven't come across that one before, but everybody can have a different trigger food.
Yeah, of course.
And in her case, can you imagine you had 10 years of taking Gaviscon and, you know, all the rest of it. And, okay, you'd find out that was the trigger. I mean, that's, you know, wonderful, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And you kind of kick yourself to go, well, I could have had 10 years of more peaceful life if I'd have known that information. It is. I think it's revolutionary. And this is why I explain to people, when I teach about the gut, I say, look, if you've got any symptom, I don't care what it is, anything, just try looking at your diet. And like you said, microanalyze it. Food reaction, start to look for correlation. And it could be anything. It could be gluten. It could be strawberries. It could be green peas. We don't know.
It can be, because everybody's completely different. But I just think becoming much more aware of how much impact everything you put in your body has is just a really good thing for anybody to do. I think, you know, I remember when I was a kid, you know, things like Angel Delight, and you're probably too young to remember all this. So there were sort of certain chemical foods around where I remember as a kid just looking at it and going, how do they know that it's actually going to be all right for a human being to eat this? Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Because it comes from a packet, it was so processed. I just sort of like, how do they know that as a child, it was a logic, you know, like you got real food, we know from forever and ever that it was all right to eat, but how did they know that doing things to food would still be okay? And I remember I used to ask my mum things like that, and she'd say, they couldn't answer me. But I think that now we're just looking at what's happened to us all, you know, with all the Frankenstein foods around and all the rest of it. You know, and as soon as you get back to a natural, just fresh food diet, you're in a better place.
Couldn't agree more. With the research, I'm always interested in what's evolving. What's happening right now in gut research? Where do you think it's moving? Do you think there's going to be a couple of sort of moments or revelations that you're going to think, oh, actually, this is going to make our approach or our thought process a little bit different in the future?
Yeah, the thing about being nutritional therapists is the research is changing all the time, and you are having to tweak things, and you are having to reevaluate things that you maybe thought were okay before and then they're not, and all the rest of it. But I do think that if you work in the nutrition world, you need to be able to admit when new information comes out and adapt and change to it as well. I think one of the problems that I see in the medical profession is sometimes there's a clinging on to a piece of research because that's what somebody has used and applied for a long, long time. Something new comes out and they won't look at it, they won't accept it. It's a bit like, you know, doctors who say there's only celiac disease and non-celiac gluten sensitivity doesn't exist. It's a bit like people who say, you know, intestinal hyperpermeability doesn't exist, you know, leaky gut. I mean, the research is now there, it does exist. But I just think as individuals, we need to be adapting all the way along, you know, as the research comes out. And I just think, also just latch on to the simplest, most commonsensical things sometimes. So things like, you know, the fact that having lots of diversity in the diet is good for, you know, a diverse microbiome. Who can argue with that? The problem is that in terms of big food business and investment that's out there, there's masses going on at the moment. All the manufacturers are in massive sort of competition with each other in a race at the moment to bring out all these functional foods that we're going to be showered on and told us this is the magic pill. That's going to, and I just think, so you were asking about the research, what should we latch onto? The thing that I'm going to stand here clinging on to is real food, real vegetables, diversity of plants, because I don't think anyone can argue with that. Even if you haven't got loads of money and you can't afford sort of, some of the sort of probiotic foods that are coming along and all the rest of it, as long as you're doing all this sort of vegetables and the diversity, you're going to be all right.
I couldn't agree more. So I think you touched on a really important point. And do you know what? I hadn't actually thought about this, and it's probably a little bit of a scarier prospect. So we've just been talking about real food, and as personal trainers, as coaches, as health geeks, we currently have quite a clear battle in our eyes, and it's becoming a little bit muddier. We've got processed food, we've got real food, and in the middle there's this section of functional foods. There's not that many if you look around the supermarket shelves, but I think what you're now saying is probably quite scary, is that line between processed and functional and real food in the middle is going to become a lot more difficult to navigate as nutritional therapists, coaches, trainers, because we're going to have clients coming to us saying, oh, so-and-so's brought out a cereal and now it's got X, Y, and Z in it. This says it's now got this in it. And we're going to have these kind of hybrid processed real foods with added ingredients that are probably going to have some mad claims on them because they've done one study in a Petri dish. And actually, I hadn't thought about it. That's probably a little bit alarming. It's going to probably create more hard work for us.
Yeah, but the thing is about food claims, the big companies will, somehow or other, get where they need to be to have the claims. I mean, because the fact is, we do know there's lots and lots of research about how when you have, particular bacteria flourishing in the gut, that those are linked, say, with better mood, or the whole thing that I found just absolutely fascinating when I, about 3 years ago, started looking at the microbiome research. I just couldn't believe it when I first read about how, the microbiome being connected with, your calorie extraction from the food that you're eating. And I remember the first time I saw that, I just thought that is going to be so massive. That's going to just revolutionise everything, because it means just the simple calories in and out thing is a bit antiquated oversimplification of weight management. Mm-hmm. What you're actually finding now is if you look at the microbiome and you want to have one that's flourishing, with your trillions of bacteria, and then you want certain species to be particularly flourishing and looking lovely. And when that's all looking good, diverse, and good ones sort of, really flourishing, then you're in a position where there's less aggressive calorie extraction from the food that you're eating, and your hunger hormones balance out. So, you shouldn't feel over hungry, and you'll know when you'll feel full up. Whereas if you eat, the beige Western diet and all the rest of it, and you haven't got much diversity of flora in them, lots of these good ones aren't flourishing, you can be in a position where you're counting stupid calories, but you're hungry all the time and you never feel full up. Do you see what I mean? But anyway, there is so much happening in that area. We are going to be bombarded with products, and I'm just going to cling onto the simple stuff. Just learn to cook, and and buy a sharp knife and chop up your vegetables and look at colour on your plate. And I would say, try not to get dazzled by all that stuff that is going to be put in front of us.
Unfortunately, a lot of people are dazzled by it, and I think that's just human nature to say, is there a better way? Is there a better thing? Could it give me a bit quicker result?
No, it's like I'm being bombarded at the moment with emails from America from some company, I can't remember what it's called, and it keeps saying, forget diet, just take a probiotic. That's what it says in the caption. It's like, forget diet. It's basically saying eat as much crap as you want and just, just take this probiotic and you'll be fine. Is that a long-term solution? No.
Who knows? Education. So I suppose we better. We've already mentioned your book a bit. The people that are on video, YouTube, Facebook, will be able to see the book, The Gut Makeover. If people do want to grab a copy, what will they learn in it that you might not have already covered today?
Oh, what have I not covered in there already? There's something really important, is the way that you eat.
Okay.
Okay. Again, it's one of these things where it gets completely forgotten and lost, and we don't listen to it. But, slow down when you're eating. It's so obvious, but it can have massive impact on your digestion, massive impact on your hunger hormones and all the things that I've spoken about. And it's just so simple. But you have to get into these new habits, sit down at a proper table, chew your food. I say in the book 20 times per mouthful. Okay, that's an exaggeration, but it depends what you're eating. Having soup, it's not going to be 20. But if you're having, a steak, 20 is actually, you could get up to 30 quite quickly if you're chewing properly. But this chewing your food properly is just absolutely so important to your microbiome. Again, something that people aren't going to make a lot of money out telling you to chew properly, are they? But you see, you want to have your food fully digested, because if undigested particles of food are reaching your colon, it causes dysbiosis, which means your gut bacteria gets out of balance and, and bloating and all sorts of other problems. But it's very, very simple. But so many people eat lunch at their desks, the M&S sandwich, the meal deal with the Coke and the bag of crisps, and they're sort of checking emails and, answering the phone, and your parasympathetic nervous system is not switched on, and you need that switched on to digest your food properly.
And then we all wonder why we're tired at 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Exactly, yeah.
So, people, if you're listening, Jeanette, is the best place to grab this on Amazonian, the old Amazon place?
You can buy it all over the place. It's in all the main bookstores, on W.H. Smith's, Waterstones, Foyles. Yeah, you can get it on Amazon. They've got a very good price on it at the moment.
All right, don't brag. So, if you do want to grab a copy, people, it's called The Gut Makeover. It's got tons of... In fact, it's pretty much like half of its recipes. There's loads of recipes in it.
Yes. Well, that's the other thing. I put 50 recipes in there, and I have done things that are hopefully easy to get hold of the ingredients. They're pretty quick to cook, because you're going to be doing quite a lot of cooking yourself, and the recipe book that comes out in June is going to have another 100 recipes in it as well.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Jeanette, again, thank you very much for being on the show. If people want to find or follow your work, where's the best place? Facebook, Twitter, websites, that kind of stuff?
I have my own website, JeannetteHyde.com, and that's where you can find out about all the group gut makeovers that I'm doing. I'm also about to run some retreats in Menorca this year. I have there's a nice Facebook group running alongside the book, and people post questions, and I interact with readers on there. So that's, you just have to like the page. It's called The Gut Makeover, and it's a Facebook page. I'm on Twitter, Jeanette Hyde, and I do a little bit of Instagramming when I cook something that I feel like posting.
Sure. I will spell Jeanette's name out for you. Jeannette Hyde.
Yeah, there's a lot of N's and a lot of T's in it.
There is. That's why I thought I'd spell it out, because if you asked me to spell it, I'd write it down wrong. But English was never my strong point in school. So, Jeanette, again, thank you very much for being on the show. It's been lovely to talk to you. When this goes live, we'll get feedback from people. I always ask that people sort of say hello on Twitter. Tag us into a tweet. Let us know what they think of the show. So if you're listening to this, if you've enjoyed it, say hello to myself and Jeanette. Ask her a question. Find the book if you're interested, and just evolve the conversation. That's why we're here. That's why we're trying to educate. That's why we're trying to help you on your journey. We're here to help you, so don't feel that you can't come and ask a question of either of us. So That's us off, Jeanette.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome, and I'll see all you guys on next week's show. Hi, it's Ben Coomber. So a lot of people have been asking me about my warm-up with training. At the moment, I'm trying to go through a lot of rebalancing with my training. I'm trying to make my body work a lot better.